Hey gamers! Am I the main character of my own story? Or just a throwaway companion in someone else's story? Oh god. It's me, Jason.
And I'm that player character who's playing Merry Fudge Kill with the whole party. It's me, Patrick. Welcome to RPGaymer Season 4, Episode 7, a podcast about companions.
Woo! I think there should be a company called Merry Fudge. Like that could be Merry Fudge is killing it. Like
or your drag name is Merry Fudge Kill.
Merry Fudge Kill. Yeah, oh my god, how is that not existing yet? That's crazy.
We have a fried chicken place in here, like around where I'm from, called Mary Brown's.
Ooh.
There you go. They need to make their own fudge.
Yeah.
Well, as you notice, we are back for another episode of RPGaymer, and today we are going to be talking about companions in all video games. But before we get started, I want to introduce our new guest of...
It's our new companion.
Yeah, and our new companion, and it's someone who's never been on the podcast before, so I want to welcome SuperRad to the podcast. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
So welcome. So glad to have you here. As usual, I will first of all ask you here because you are a little expert on the content that we're talking about today, as I've noticed. But are you friends with Brendan Hess? Do you know him?
Yeah. The Crawl?
Yeah, the Crawl.
Yeah.
He's the one who recommended me to reach out to you to be on here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I think we met through that fighting game tournament. I think that's where it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then we became mutuals on Twitter. And then someone told me recently, because he just came out with a video about dungeon crawlers.
Uh-huh.
And I had like a community member of mine. They were like, "Oh, I just got flashbanged because this guy mentioned SuperRad in his video." I was like, "Oh yeah, that's my buddy."
Nice. I love him. He was a great guest on last season, and he's one of the few people I know that has as much love for the Etrian Odyssey series as I do.
It's a deep love.
I can believe that.
He is my dude. But enough about him. Let's talk about you. As usual, want to do a little interview for our new guest so our listeners can get to know you. So you are a career content creator, correct? Like this is your jam. This is what you do.
Yeah, this is what pays the rent now. That's how I always like to frame it.
I was gonna say, when did you get started, and what got you started on this gig?
I got started. I started as a hobby. It was before COVID. I was working. I was working a full-time job, like a full-time office job for a while, that I really hated. And then I would come home and like I had just started getting into like streaming like for like 8 hours a day because I wanted to like be like a big streamer at one point. It eventually like I started to go back to school, and so I wasn't able to do that. And I fiddled and like dabbled in, there's like 2 videos like at the very bottom of my channel, like the 2 oldest videos were ones where I was like testing the waters to see like what kind of videos I would want to do. And I did those like very early on, and they did it like okay, and then I never made any again for like 2 years. But then COVID hit, and I wanted to make some Monster Hunter videos like as a hobby because I had a bunch of time to kill, because I had a bar job at the time and it closed down because of COVID. So I started to make the Monster Hunter videos, and funny enough, they didn't actually like do that well. Like they did okay. And then like, they started to blow up when I turned them in. I combined them all into like a big video, and they started to blow up. And so then I started to stream more, and I started to make more videos and stuff like that. And then once I really got into long form content, that's when it really became like cool. I can like live off of this type career, you know?
That's awesome.
Right. Isn't it funny when some people tell you your content is too long, but like the 3-hour videos are sometimes what really hit. Like, and just that some people will literally compile, like if they've broken down a full series, they'll just like compile all their videos and redo it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a full retrospective. It's crazy.
Yeah, that wasn't even my idea too. It was funny. Like, I mean, I decided I wanted to do that, but I saw someone else, I can't remember who it was, but they made like a Silent Hill series that was really interesting to me, I think. And it was either Silent Hill or Resident Evil. And I was watching it. It was a long video, and I was watching it, and I realized that he had chopped up his videos from like previous releases and put them into like a remix or a redux. And so I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. Like I had just made this history series. I'm gonna do that and see how it does. And it was funny because it didn't do very well at first. And then like I think I was out downtown grocery shopping and I looked at my phone to look at my analytics,
blowing up,
and it would yeah, it went crazy. I was like, oh my god, damn.
It's such a good feeling when that happens. And I think you probably felt like it's just so random, right? Like you don't have any, sometimes you could do what you think is your best work and it just completely falls flat. And sometimes sometimes you can do just like a normal thing and it just hits so hard.
Yeah, there's definitely like a luck factor to it. I really think like one of the things I wanted to do, I was like, I like to find like a niche that I think people haven't like done yet necessarily. So like the history series of Monster Hunter was like a one for that.
Sure.
And now I'm kind of more, now that the channel is more established, I want to do things that are like not necessarily as niche, but like things I'm more interested in. So like that's why I did like the New Vegas retrospective, because like everybody's done a New Vegas retrospective.
Truly, yeah.
But I wanted to do a New Vegas retrospective because I loved it so much, and so it was nice that my channel was at a point where like I could do it and it would probably get like some views, and then that would hopefully push it over a threshold where it would be seen more, and that luckily happened. And then because that was successful, I got to make like some more videos that were like also long form and ended up being successful as well. And now I get to just do long form content, which is like more interesting to me.
I love your take on finding your niche and like how to approach your content making, because one of the things that, like, because I'm in your Discord, that I think is really cool that you do is you're doing your N64, going through the whole library of N64 games, and I just think that's like such a good idea, because some people would just play the big hits or their favorites, or if you're Jason, you might just pick just like some terrible games.
Like Quest 64 is on that list then. If you're
as I said, terrible games, but like I like how you're like, no, we're going through the full fucking thing. Like that is so awesome.
That's good.
Yeah, I had to take a break from it because I've been working on so many. Dragon's Dogma came out, so I've been working on like a ton of videos like surrounding Dragon's Dogma. Streaming's like not the main thing I do for like creation, so it's been like I want to do the challenge as like a new thing to try on the channel, but like I stream it for like the sake of having the footage there so people know I did it, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I haven't been able to do it because I've been so busy because I haven't wanted to stream it. But it's a really fun it's a fun challenge, but I found out right before I started to do it that like I was not the first person doing that. There's like this other guy, the Beast or something, that's like way ahead of me. Yeah, and he's like way ahead of me, and I was like, damn, I gotta catch up. I was like, oh, I can definitely catch up. Like that's no issue. And then I was playing through some of the games, and I was like, oh no.
Wait, are you like beating the games too to completion?
Yeah. So my thing is that I beat them all. Like you have to hit the credits,
see credits
in some capacity. Or if there's no credits in the game, like if it's a baseball game or something like that, I'll just do like a full baseball game,
like a season or a game.
Yeah. Not a full season. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a
lot of game.
That's a lot of baseball.
I feel like after a game, you probably got the gist of it.
I might unsubscribe if you did that.
Yeah. Well, I'll do the. I'll beat the game and then I'll rank it. It's like a tier list. So I'll do a tier list, and then once I've gotten through like all of the B games, I'm still working on the B games. Which when I'm doing all the B games, which I'm still doing, because they take forever. B was crazy. Once I finish all of them, I make kind of like a synopsis of my thoughts on each game, and then I try to release a video. And I've only released one, and it didn't do very well, but it doesn't do as well as the long form content, obviously. But I wanted to do something in between my long form videos that was like not long form, because a lot of people have this like weird misconception that like long form videos are very easy, but like they're very difficult to make.
I imagine that's the hardest video you could ever make. Like, that's gotta be difficult.
They take a lot of time, a lot of research, script, and if you like do your own script writing, if you do your own editing, it's like months of work per video sometimes.
I think it like took me 3 weeks to do a 25-minute video. When I was I'm still kind of going through my own journey if I want to do other content creation outside of just like the podcasting, because I do like it, but sometimes when you don't get that fuel of it landing and people
Sure.
watching it, it's hard to do. But like I remember one of the ones I did about like comparing what RPG heroes do go through compared to like what coming out is like and the coming out journey, and like I think that was about 20 minutes, and like it took me so long. It's like it's so much work because you notice this part didn't land, like some things read well but they don't speak well. You're always adapting and changing, and then editing. I know, Jason, you always get hung up on this whenever you do it. Editing is just such a bitch.
It's so hard. I can't imagine rendering a 3-hour video. Like, props to you. That's crazy.
Well, yeah, luckily I have a decent GPU, so it's not like the worst thing in the world. But when you're doing the thing is, like, when you're doing a denser video or like a shorter video, those videos can be almost as much work in different areas, because like, you know, if it's a shorter video, you probably want to put more effort into editing in comparison to like when I'm doing a retrospective and it's like 7 hours long. There's less of like a high level of editing in the video, and it's more like just it's footage that is showing what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
But not like specific to the T. It's just back there.
Yeah, right. like a general. We're hitting a general area. I try to be specific as much as possible, but like if I'm doing a shorter video, it's much more easy to be specific and put that extra time into it with your editing and stuff like that. So like all videos can take a while. It's just like long form, especially so, because there's just so much writing and there's so much recording, and then you have to edit the audio and then put it all together, and then you do have to render it, and then you have to upload it. It's crazy.
So if only you had like a companion with you to help that process. Yeah. It would be great.
Transition. Well, as Jason said, first of all, thank you for sharing some of your journey, and I think you just gave a lot of good nuggets of wisdom and like behind the scenes stuff on like getting started in video editing. But let's start talking about companions. And I think like I want to start this conversation. I think I want to start the conversation with just kind of like the notion, because I know Jason and I were discussing this even before we started recording today, because it's going to come into play with like who and what we talk about. But what do you think distinguishes a party member from a companion? Like there's got to be some overlap there, but there's likely some differences too. And I kind of want to hear your guys' input on like what you think the difference is if I say this party member versus like a true companion in a video game.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I'd say like if it was a Venn diagram, it's like almost a circle. Okay. You know, like what is the big distinguishing factor is probably like if the character has a personality and a history. Though I guess you could look at something like Final Fantasy VII, and I wouldn't say like, you know, Barrett, Aerith, or Tifa are my companions. They are just my party members. So there's they definitely tried to fix this in Rebirth, but there's a certain level of interactability that comes with it, where like you as a character, usually like someone that you are inserted, like you have inserted yourself into the game, like something like where you customize a character, you are going out and talking to these people and learning more about them and spending time with them, and that backstory can like evolve, and there's potentially like romantic options and stuff like that, just things that let you interact with them. That's generally what I would consider a companion. You know, they have their own side quests, their own active development that you have to go out of your way for, because they're supposed to feel more like real people. That's
kind of where I thought too, like piggybacking off of all of you said, like I agree with it. I think the one step that might be like a little bit more for me, I think interaction is the key word, but I think what even more so is seeing change because of the interaction, where if I think of something as a party member, like, you might be able to have a little bit of a dating sim with them, you know, or you might be able to do their little side quests and get more story with them, and I think that stuff matters. Like I think that might be a fleshed out party member, but I think a true companion is like your actions or how you work with them throughout their narrative truly sways the character that they become at the end of the game. When I think like if I think of a lot of games, like a lot of JRPGs, like I think they're set in that way, where like you have your side narratives with them, but like you don't change them. But I think of a lot of like companion games, like this character can be a full spectrum of different things depending on your choices.
yeah, like you can have change in like Tifa can change in Final Fantasy VII, but like she changes because the story deemed
Story
she would
demands
change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would agree pretty wholeheartedly with Patrick, which we just said. I don't agree with you, but I think it's the same. I feel like growth is what came to mind that separates party members and companions. Like a companion would grow, and
which could
you
be
know,
negative. It doesn't have to be.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it does stem from the player character because obviously you're playing a game as this person, so you are interacting with the person. They don't always have their own autonomy. Later on they do. Baldur's Gate, we'll get there. But I think that's a big one. So when a character can grow and become, they have their own ambitions, they have their own things that you can do or not do, and that affects what happens. I think that makes your companion. And then to draw back into the question, what's a party member and the difference? I feel like a party member is at the very least someone that will be in your group, that will be there like fighting with you. And you don't necessarily always have to play as them. Like you don't have to take control of them. But I feel like that when I would hear party member versus companion, party member seems more like limited. Like there maybe this is my caster, like as opposed to this is Pavarti, like that's in my group. Like there's a difference there in my mind, and I think the party member is more expendable, and the companion is someone I might have more investment in. That's where I would really draw the line. Oh, go ahead.
I definitely think there's like a social connection there that has to be made.
Yeah.
You know.
So absolutely. I think that's a good place to start the conversation because everyone's going to have a different definition, and I don't want to like limit anyone, especially whether it's a listener or just like us in this conversation.
Yeah.
Where I don't think like if you involve people like you said, Tifa might be more party member than companion, or Final Fantasy characters or from wherever. I think it's okay to include them in the conversation because, like you said, there's a big overlap. So as our conversation evolves, like people might agree or might not agree. I think we're just kind of going with our own definition. But it's good to see that there's a lot of commonality in like how we feel about what might distinguish the two.
Yeah, and like again, I keep saying Final Fantasy VII, but like even back when in the original, it did have like an affection mechanic, like, which would affect like their opinion on you in certain ways that would culminate in like a specific scene in the Gold Saucer as an example.
Yeah, everyone knows the Gold Saucer date.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you could see them as party members, or you could see them as companions. I think either is like technically valid because there's no like objective truth to the definition.
It's kind of like the what's the analogy, like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square.
Right.
Kind of like fits a similar vein.
It's exactly like geometry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's geometry. So back to ninth grade.
Math matters.
Yeah.
You're using math right now.
Yeah. Tifa is a rectangle. And...
Yeah. No, she is too big.
Perfect.
So going back probably even before Final Fantasy VII, because I feel like that's probably the earliest game that we've brought up so far. When do you think that authentic companions started phasing into gaming? And then maybe add in there, when did you first start noticing the notion of like a companion? Jason, you want to go first?
I'm gonna raise my hand for the people that can see me. Yeah, I think I can answer first. How should I answer first? I think that we started to see companions in like the common sense we were talking about, the mishmash of everything. I feel like almost exclusively in JRPGs. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Like on the NES, SNES time. What?
Oh, RPGs.
Yeah, JRPGs. I feel like they came as party members that were fleshed out a little bit more. So someone that like might have more of a just more of a story that wasn't just like Firian's story in Final Fantasy 2. Like there's more, or Cecil and Kane in 4. I think those are when I started to think about there's more going on than just my main character. And I'm going to do what I do in this podcast all the time and relate it to like what's happening at the time. You didn't get that really with like Mario or Sonic and stuff. Yeah, you have Tails, you have Knuckles, but like they're just factors in Sonic's story. They're not doing their own thing. And I think that's when you started to see it first.
I don't know if I would go back as far for Final Fantasy, just because kind of like what we were saying, where like even Final Fantasy 2, the characters might have names, but like there's no personality going there. But like I agree, like Final Fantasy 4, I think you're even though they're one note, like at least there is a note.
Exactly. There is a note, and like people remember like Tella, like their story, like you get it. For me personally, I feel like to answer the other part, I saw companions first. I didn't know it was what it was, but in Dragon Quest, I think it was Dragon Warrior 3 at the time,
Uh-huh.
when they re-released it on Game Boy Color, you had your people behind you. They like followed you on the map. And I thought, hey, that's so cool. There's people like accompanying you. I think the better example people probably know is Pokemon Yellow. Like when you get Pikachu to be with you, he does nothing in terms of what companions do, but he is like the embodiment of a companion, like a definition of him, because he's just there to like cheer you along and be there. And that's when I realized kind of that you could have someone else go with you on a journey. You don't have to be solo.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Pikachu is actually a good example. Like it doesn't do much, but just that extra level in comparison to like I'm sure some people consider all their Pokemon in their party their companions because they're supposed to be like your pets almost. But like Pikachu is the one that like goes that extra step to be like a companion in the game.
Yeah, and like you can't evolve him. Like there's other things like you can. He learns Surf. Like there's random stuff that makes him more special. And I thought that was a neat case of like this person is special for these reasons. And then that's what I think if you looked at it could stem to everything we have nowadays with modern games. You can go back pretty far. What about you, Patrick? Though I know you're.
So for me, like thinking more in the traditional or my kind of more my definition of companions, I think probably first noticing it more along with like Baldur's Gate 1, and using characters that appear in Baldur's Gate 3, like Jaheira and Minsk. You know, they're in the full scope of the series. But like, I think for when I actually started noticing truly companions was a game. Neverwinter Nights was probably the first that I played, or KOTOR, and then really getting into companions and what they are. Dragon Age Origins. I think that's when I actually started to care about other party members. Like, I think it was the first game that made me actually like feel and want to get to stories more, because before that, I think it was more these characters are truly fleshed out versus, you know, we're talking about FF4 or even 5 and 6, like which I mean 4, 5, and 6 are probably my favorite Final Fantasy trio. There's just not enough, you know, like there's a personality trait and a little bit of backstory and that's it. But some of these other games we're starting to get like actual complex characters. There's debate between characters, there's debate with your actions. Some characters won't stay with you depending on what you do, so I think there's a little bit more involved, and I think that kind of comes in with like Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights and KOTOR and whatnot.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if I had to choose, I'd say CRPGs are probably like the cream of the crop. Like you can go, like, I think in terms of like going back the furthest for me would be like from personal experience, Fallout 2 even has companions that are like worth like having like the title of companion. Like one of the first guys you meet, Sulik, is he has a ton of personality. There's like a backstory to him. You can choose to bring him along or not, and he's like a unique character. He's like one of the ones that actually has a talking head, because not all of them have that.
Which I mean, that's when you know, like, things matter.
This is special. Like,
Like those moments when you would see the talking heads in Fallout 1 and 2 is when you knew like this is a very important moment.
Well, it's so funny because like you meet Sulik first, and he's big character, talking head, like has like interesting stuff to say, has a unique personality. And then you meet, I think like the next companion you'd probably meet in that game is Vic, and Vic is an old man who has no talking head. It still is like a party, like he's a party member basically,
but
and Sulik is a companion. I know. Yeah, exactly.
That's a good way to distinguish it in that game though, where I feel like they, you know, make it a little bit more clear on what's a little bit more important. And I think that kind of goes on with what I want to talk about next, because we're kind of like talking about, you know, all these different variety of characters from different places. Is like, do you think that companions are a necessary piece of a good character arc or storyline? Like, do you think that if we didn't have these fleshed out companions, a story isn't necessarily good?
You can take it, SuperRad.
I think it depends on the game and depends on the narrative. There's I think they say this. I think they say this in Dragon's Dogma 2 or something. But there's like a good story. Like in a good story, all the characters are there for a reason and have like a role to fill. And so if your game has characters in it, and they've been written well, and they have a purpose, whether they're companions or not, it could be a story about like a single character, you know. I think it can be a good story. If we're talking about like a like a game like Baldur's Gate or like a more in-depth RPG, I think companions are definitely like a huge factor in making a narrative good. Mostly because like when that character you're creating is not necessarily they can be a self-insert, but they can also just be like your creation. Being able to companion characters are good for reflecting what you want of your character out into the world, because it affects them and it comes back to you, and then it like affects things around you. So it definitely adds to the experience. I don't think it's necessary, but like I think a lot of RPGs, like Western RPGs, use it because they found it as like a successful tool to make good narratives. So it is definitely like a useful aspect of game design.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Okay. I would agree with that too, and I think that you don't need a character to have a game and go forward. But I think if you're looking at like a story-driven narrative game, I don't know of a way that you can really do that without some sort of companion in there. I think the biggest argument, and I'll save it for Patrick, might be like a series like Etrian Odyssey, where your companions aren't always fleshed out because they're like people that you make on your own. But I think if you're going to have that reflection, that mirror, like you were saying, SuperRad, you kind of need it in a companion. And I think that's unique to gaming in general as a medium. Like, if I'm playing a game, I can do whatever I want. And I also know that, like, the developer has to make characters in a certain way. If someone's there, maybe I can talk to them. If I can't talk to them, I already know they're not important. But if I can talk to someone and it's Fallout 2 and their talking head pops up, now I know it's important. So when developers... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say to that, because you brought up Etrian, and I'm thinking of games where like you have no characters whatsoever. It's a complete party build. That could be Icewind Dale. That could be Etrian, games like that.
Like Wizardry, you can go way back.
Yeah. What makes those games interesting is the world is developed enough that it's a character. So for me, I hate it when you have a game when you have so much emphasis on what the main character is and does, but the other characters don't get fleshed out nearly as much as the main character does. So the supporting cast isn't really like a supporting cast. You know what I mean? Just the main characters on a pedestal. And I think a lot of RPGs kind of, and I think it's mostly JRPGs that kind of like fall for that. Or even think about it like your like Dragon Ball Z. Goku and Vegeta are the only two who will ever. Why is
Yamcha there?
Right, yeah, and that's what I mean. Like other people aren't really the crux of the narrative. They don't really offer much at all. And I think you see that in a lot of that style. So I think when you have a game where it is all characters have like you might be like the focal point, but I mean like there's still enough development of all of your party, or there's no personality and the personality comes from the world. I think like those are like the two polars that work really well. And I think the further you kind of get to the middle where it's kind of like it's just the main character and the supporting characters are like, once their narrative is done, they don't really
step out.
Like but why are they still here? That's where I'm like, I don't know how much this like other characters are fleshing out the story. So
it's a good point.
I agree.
It's a good point. I think the idea that you need a character to make the main character story better, I mean, you don't. Like, you can keep going for sure, but I think that it is and this is not a negative way, it's the easier route to go.
Sure.
Because if you're a good writer or have great story, great elements, and you can put it into a fun game, that's only going to boost that really unique thing about playing a video game like that. Like, the player can experience the story you wrote in a unique way that would never happen in a book. Because if the book was like, hey, you're going to Mount Doom, we're going to throw it in, but I'm like, fuck Mount Doom, I'm going to fly in on this pterodactyl I found somewhere else. Like, you can't do that in a book, but you can do it in a game. And so when it's developed that way and you can get these characters that make me, the player, impose that onto the game world, that's really special. So I think that when we're having this discussion on companions, I think this is the unique aspect of this part of gaming in general, which is very large, that you can do that in video games, and companions make that happen.
Sure.
So I think that that's a really, really big key for just gaming in general, but specifically party members, companions, and the like. I'm going to get off my pedestal now if y'all want to talk.
Well, so Jason, earlier you brought up that, you were talking about Sonic and Tails and Knuckles, and like I'm just trying to think of the framework in terms of games that aren't RPGs, because even though like we're RPGaymer, we do like talking about different games. So I think Rad, I want to start with you. Like, how do you feel about companions and how they're designed in non-RPGs versus how they're designed in actual, whether that's JRPGs or Western RPGs.
In non-RPGs.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can use Sonic as an example, I guess. Because,
sure. Oh, we don't have to. You can use whatever, but yeah, if you want to use Sonic.
Well, no, I was just thinking about it because you know, you play like the original Sonic games, like the 2D ones, which have like and like I'm sure a Sonic fan's gonna get mad at me for this, but they have minimal story. You know, it's more of like an arcade experience.
How dare you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, you know, it's like a 2D arcadey game. You know, Tails is there, Knuckles is there. Knuckles is even like the villain, I think, for a bit, but like. But like it's very minimal, right? Because like the game's narrative isn't the focus, right?
That's right.
But what you'll notice is as the narrative becomes more important in a Sonic game, like say Sonic Adventure, suddenly all of those side characters have gotten much more fleshed out, right? Like to the point even where, you know, Amy has a game. Like you go through, you play part of the game as Amy, you play part of the game as Tails, and you see like what they're doing, and they have their own personalities and things they like and dislike. You know, Tails is
just
like
laughing at Amy being developed character. Well, you're right, but like, sorry, I just remember playing that game and just like walking around with Amy with the hammer, using it to like hit and flip forward constantly. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's character development. I get
it. They're working on it. They're working on it. So like, I mean, like, you definitely see it, and I definitely think it helped. It's almost a necessity to, like, see these people be developed if you want to have, like, a grander narrative. And so it does happen in, like, non-RPGs for sure. I'm trying to think of, like, another non-RPG where I would say that you have active companions. Maybe you could look at, like, something like Warcraft as an example.
Sure.
Or, like a hero-based RTS where, like, some of the characters you know how like in Warhammer you could have like Arthas and like the mage chick, I can't remember her name.
Never played Warhammer.
not Warhammer, sorry, Warcraft.
Oh, Warcraft. Yeah. Okay,
yeah, so they'll like you'll have hero characters that have their own personalities and know each other, but then you have like your rabble. You know, so it definitely gets handled in different ways in different games. I think you'll get the most depth out of a companion if you're playing an RPG because they're the most narrative focused games generally.
Well, they allow more time for stuff like that too, because, you know, you think of run length of a lot of RPGs and you're landing at least in the 30s, you know, and if it's a game that ends earlier than that, you don't get a lot of character development. Like, I will still say that Chrono Trigger is one of the pinnacle RPGs ever made. I won't say like best, but pinnacle. But I mean, like, there's still not a lot of character development in that game, and it's less than 30 hours, so there's no room for it. But if we're talking about like non-RPGs, like something I played very recently, God of War Ragnarok, and you know, not an RPG, it's an action adventure game. Of course, it has RPG elements in a way, because almost all games do now, and the genre gets blurred. But you know, Atreus and Freya get as much character development in Ragnarok, almost more so than Kratos does, because, you know, we've heard a lot of Kratos' story. I mean, and I don't want to spoil it for Jason because I know Jason hasn't played it yet. But I mean, Kratos does get more character development, even more somehow in that game, which is still really powerful. But you know, like Atreus and Freya, like really, like you are, as you're traveling, learning their story. You know, and Kratos is still just kind of bland and not I would say bland, but like almost clean slate in some ways to make room for those other characters. And I kind of like that a lot, because whoever you are traveling with at the time is whose story you're hearing. And you kind of learn the same thing in The Last of Us. You know, yes, we learn a lot about Joel, but like we also learn a ton about Ellie. Or the two the younger kid and the other guy that they travel with in the first game. I can't remember their names. They both don't make it.
Other kid? Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, not Bill, but Bill, because Bill's only in the show. Well, no, Bill's in the game. Bill's an example too. Like you learn a lot about him in the game as well. But it's just the way that he is fleshed out. Like even in the one segment that Bill is in, like he gets some growth there too.
I do think it gets done really well in like non-RPGs. And like now that you brought it up, I remember I played through Uncharted 4 like kind of recently. And the way that they handle, like, because like you're playing that game as like Nathan Drake, and you're like climbing around and shooting stuff and whatever. But the narrative especially in 4 is greatly tied to the person you have behind you for the majority of that journey. So like it's his brother for a huge portion of it, and then it's his wife. And so you get a lot of their not just you get a lot of the brother's development, and you get some of his wife's development, but more so his wife's there to kind of it's that mirror thing I was talking about. We see how he affects and hurts the people near him, and we get like a front row seat to that on the journey because she's right there with us and like telling him how much he sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I love that. Jason, why don't you kind of take us on there? But I think like we're kind of showing some great ways that like this is not companions aren't exclusively RPGs.
Totally. And I feel like to look at the perspective of gaming a little bit wider scope, I think when you got to like SNES era, I feel like developers were now thinking, how can I engage the player differently? And talking about non-RPGs, so we can talk about Sonic again. And
yay!
Thinking about that, like, you know, you can use Amy, for example, as a way in Sonic Adventure to make the player play a different type of game. Like, she handles differently than Sonic. And I think there was a time where PS2 era, if you want to think about there, that's kind of what some of these companions outside of RPGs sort of did. They presented different ways to play the same game. Maybe look at, this is a rough example, but I think Devil May Cry 3, you can be Dante or,
Virgil?
Shit. Yes,
Virgil,
thank you.
yeah.
Virgil. Yeah, exactly. And they play slightly different. Like, it's a different way to play it. I think after we had that, and then in my opinion, because I'm favoring RPGs, I think developers were playing catch up to the RPG genre. Then they realized this character is more than just a slate that we throw something on and it changes. They can now be integral.
It's more than a different play style, you mean?
Totally. It could be integral to the plot. And that's where I think we are now. I had my notes that there's 3 eras of like companions, and we're in the era we're in now is that they're integral to plot. So Patrick, you gave the 2 examples I was going to give, God of War and Last of Us. Like, the game is the companion. Like, Kratos, let's talk God of War. Kratos is great, but that's not Kratos' story. Like, it's really Atreus in the first game, and I haven't played the second, but it's probably Atreus and Freya who connect. They connect back to you, and it's because we're coming full circle where I already know who Kratos is, and he is badass, but he is not one-dimensional. And that's where you get the different type of gameplay and different stories. I also think it's to spring a second like tangent we don't have to talk about. I think it's where you get like salty gamers about certain topics when characters become more developed, and maybe a hot take, and I think people don't want to think about it and they just want to play a game, which is totally valid. I just want to be Kratos and kill stuff, but that's not who Kratos is anymore. He has adapted and changed. So I think that this comes from that. The times have
changed, so the game
exactly. The times have changed. He's still badass. He still does these things, but he also has this child. Like, what are you going to do? That's what the game is now. And I think it's better narratively because it creates a better package for gaming in general with this companion, but it is a different experience. I don't know. Get over it, in my opinion. That's what I would say. But
it's kind of the beauty right now of like, you know, games being games back in the day, which I think games should still be games. And there will always be those games, you know, that are just games. I've said games a lot there.
You said games like 7 times in that
But
sentence.
like now we get to think of games as like an artwork or a form of art. And I think that's like the companions, you know, like it's almost like reality TV is written in a way, and like people win awards for great reality TV, but it's because of the way that like scripts are written for the reality TV shows. I almost think of that like for video games too, where like, you know, it's not just a game anymore. Like there's just so much more to it that we can like live and breathe and enjoy. We've kind of danced around this a little bit too with what we're talking about, and I don't know if this is so much of a taboo or touchy subject, but what we were bringing up JRPG characters, and we were bringing up Western RPG characters, and I'm not one to ever say one is better, and I don't like smashing them against each other at all. Like I think both are like equally great. Like I don't want to say genres, but I mean like examples of
like interpretations.
Yeah, interpretations of RPGs. But I guess I want to know, do you think that there is at the core ways that JRPGs and Western RPGs handle companions differently?
Oh yeah,
yes,
like easily. There's much more fluid interaction with your companions in Western RPGs than there are I'm gonna say in most JRPGs. And I don't want people to think I'm saying that means that like JRPG characters aren't getting fleshed out, because there are some games like. There's some games like Xenogears, for example, which just like the characters
literally flesh out the entire time. Like,
yeah.
So some, not all of them, but some of them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so like they're so interesting, and you learn a lot about them and stuff like that. But like, you know, the JRPG characters are interesting, and you learn a lot about them. But the Western characters are interesting, and you learn a lot about them. And the difference is that I'm learning a lot about the Western characters by asking. And like legitimately like interacting with them, and like sometimes sidestepping certain interactions in order to get like the knowledge that I want, sure. like a real conversation, in comparison to like most JRPGs where it'd be like, here's a list of topics and you can ask these questions and they can be very interesting, but like it's a fairly linear experience generally.
I am with you there. Thinking of the two biggest RPG like AAA titles that I've played, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Baldur's Gate 3, like for Western, like just thinking about it, where the interaction for the JRPG characters is kind of like here is your quest, we are throwing in side quests for you because like your narrative ends very early, and now we have to fill it with some little side content to still make you relevant. Or Persona 5, where you go on dates with the people and you level up your social link, but like it's not truly changing the character. Ooh, clouds.
Wow.
It's not really changing the character or anything like that, but they're still like reasonably well written characters, even if they are tend to be like tropey and one notey. But like then you think of something like Baldur's Gate, where their narrative like begins when you get them and ends at the end of the game and into the ending, and some of it depends on what you have chosen with them for them as you go, and they're constantly involved. So I prefer that, and I think that's when I go back and think of JRPGs, that in the past, when you have those party members that are still here, and you like you're like, oh, I love this game, but like, why is this character still here? Or
sure.
the ones that were a little bit better, when they would make something a little bit interesting, where a character might leave for a little bit and then come back, almost adds like depth to a character. Like you think of Final Fantasy IV, Kain. Kain is so much more interesting because he's constantly being ripped out of the party. It makes him a lot more interesting than a lot of the other characters, because you can't guarantee that he's always going to be there. And it's just one simple thing there. It involves a little more. You can't impact him or affect him because it's prescribed, but there's just so much more interest there.
He's just so edgy.
Yeah, he's so edgy.
He's so edgy. I got thoughts. I feel like SuperRad, you're kind of hitting on the thing I'm thinking here too. I feel like with Western RPGs or games in general, I think that you're given a palette and you can say, how do you want to develop yourself and the characters around you? You can interact and like find stuff, find quests, find information, find backstory. I think to a small extent with JRPGs, you're more so told what their backstory is, or you're like, hey, this is what they do. Do you want to investigate that? And you go down that path. To pick on two games in particular, I kind of struggle here because I don't play too many modern JRPGs, so I'm going to pick Final Fantasy 15.
Okay.
And then I think for
companions, the JRPG.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect. And then for your Western side, like any more recent Bethesda or BioWare game, let's just, I don't know, we can talk about a good one. Anything really. Let's talk about Skyrim. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. Actually, Skyrim's a terrible example.
That's a terrible example.
Let's maybe talk about Fallout 4. Yeah. There you go. The reason why the reason why I think there's a difference, like with Final Fantasy 15, I played it a while ago. I think is it Ignis? That's like the cook. Like he's a chef. Is that who it is? Like you're kind of told that, and you're told that he's really great, and like, hey, I want some recipes, and then you go and do it, and you see how it cooks. It looks delicious, and all these things. You don't discover it. You're just told it, and then you go, and you're like, okay, cool. This is what he does. Whereas if you're looking at Fallout 4. I don't think there's any specific cooks in that game particularly, but like you might discover your companion, Hancock, like is this renegade badass who's actually got a heart, and he protects good neighbor.
So you're saying it's kind of like the showing versus telling, where like
it's showing versus telling.
JRPGs kind of like tell you someone is great, where Western RPGs might more show you,
right?
Like you're kind of a part of that development.
You can choose it. I think picking Baldur's Gate is really tough because it's going to make everything else seem shitty because it does it really well, but that's the perfect example. No one in that game is going to be the same as someone else. Like if you pick Astarion, okay, first off, you don't even have to pick Astarion, but if you do and you run the game with him, I guarantee your Astarion won't be the exact same as mine. And that just doesn't happen with Final Fantasies. And they are trying, from what I can see, we can X out any MMOs because that's kind of a different story, but I haven't played 16, but I think 16 is trying that, where like they want you to make some effort, but they just don't reach it. No. It's not the same.
It's so linear.
It's too linear, and I think that's where that difference
first
comes.
15 hours were incredible, and then once the loop started, I was like, I am not enjoying this game at all.
So it's the opposite of 13, where the first 15 hours sucked and then it got better.
No, 15 never got better, or 13 never.
No, 13. Oh, 13 never got better.
Fair. And that's a wrap on part 1 of this week's episode. We'll be back next week with part 2, so you can hear the rest of our gaming-related shenanigans. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, so you never miss an episode of RPGaymer.